So the last few weeks we've been talking about our mission and what our mission is. And so everybody remember what their mission is? There we go. Make disciples. Go out and share Jesus. That's our mission. It doesn't matter who you are, how young you are, how old you are. It doesn't matter what religion you're from. It doesn't matter whether you're male, female. Doesn't matter. That's your whole mission. And so we're getting ready to come into Thanksgiving, right? And so with Thanksgiving is really supposedly a time of gratitude. And so that's what we're going to be talking about, because gratitude is this. It's a fundamental ingredient to a deep and meaningful life. And everybody keeps searching and looking for, okay, what am I here for? When you think about what's going on, you look at right now, our nation is in trouble. And not just our nation, the whole world's in trouble. The price of gas is not just affecting America. It's affecting everywhere. And they keep saying, well, the price of gas has come down. Well, no, it's gone up. And yes, it has dropped, okay? But now we have another major problem that is looming. And that is, get this, not only are we going to have a gas shortage, we're going to have a diesel shortage. So guess what? Diesel is what gets into these trucks that transport all your food. And so people are starting now to choose. Remember back a few years ago, they would always talk about elderly people having to choose on whether to eat or medicine. Or some was feed their pets in medicine because they had grown fond of their pets and they couldn't afford pet food and medicine. So they said, well, let's bring down the price of medicine. Everything's going along fine, and now all of a sudden, everything's gone the last couple of years. And then now we see a whole lot of mess still going, okay? And they're trying to clean all of this stuff up. And the problem is that what we're also seeing, and I don't know if you've seen it, but lately there's a lot of people that are famous that kind of, if you grew up in the time that I did, and certain TV shows, you've watched some people in the last few months that have died. A lady by the name of Angela Lansbury, who starred in the show that she was famous for, was Murder, She Wrote. Okay? But she was actually a very famous actress even before that series came along. But everybody began to realize who she was. A popular country and western singer by the name of Loretta Lynn, who also passed away. Then, just recently, a lady by the name of Louise Fletcher, who was Nurse Ratched on One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Y'all remember that show, right? We all starred in it. And then just this week, Ball of Fire, Jerry Lee Lewis passed away. And when you begin to watch, you begin to start seeing these. But can I tell you something else? Look at some of the others. These are people that are in their 70s and 80s, maybe 90s, that are dying. But I'm watching people that were famous in certain little movies, 25, 26, 27, 32, that are all dying. And we begin to look at everything and think, okay, Lord, what is it that I'm supposed to be grateful for? It was a huge discussion because of the lockdown of the pandemic. And they're trying to figure out why all of the crimes in the big cities like New York, Chicago, Detroit, New Orleans, Washington, D.C., Cincinnati, Cleveland. All of them. And they're wondering, why are teenagers the main culprit in a lot of these crimes? Why? They didn't go to school for 2 years. And they're wondering, okay, so why? What's so bad about that? Well, what's so bad about that is they're not learning anything, and when you've got teenagers sitting around with nothing to do, they're going to get in trouble. And they're going to find a way to get into trouble. And when you get a bunch of teenagers together, they do stupid things, like all dress up in green suits and go beat up people on the subway. Or you watch all of the carjackings that they're doing, all of the beating of the elderly that they're doing. And you're thinking, oh Lord, we're in a mess. And so what ends up happening a lot of times is when we begin to mourn these people that are so great, and we look at all of their achievements and we start doing comparisons, it's like, okay, I'm not them. But we're beginning to sense, I don't know about you, but we're beginning to sense a great loss. Just in the last few weeks, I've lost a few friends that I've grown up with. One was a guy, Trevor, which I met when I first started preaching. He was just 18 years old. Lost him. Maggie, the young lady that comes here with Tammy, who has her daughter, Ellie, little girl, her sister, 30-some years old, died. She had diabetes. She needed a kidney transplant, was getting ready to get the kidney transplant. But she got an infection in her leg, and they had to cut her leg off. And from there was nothing they could do. She died. I went to see Chet, and he's not doing well. He's struggling. Feeny, she keeps falling. She has an infection. She's not doing well. We're seeing people left and right in the last couple of years that we just lose. And we wonder, okay, Lord, what's going on and what's happening? Because what we want, every one of us, I believe, is understanding that one day, sooner or later, we're all going to die. But when we focus just on that, we're missing the other parts of this, because we keep asking ourselves, what's the most important thing in life, Lord? What is it? And the other part about it is this: how do I fully live so that I'm ready to die? Because when you start looking around and you start watching everybody pass, you're beginning to understand that you could be next. My mom is just turned 93. Good days and bad days. This week was a good day. My sister was there visiting with my mom, and a lot of times my mom doesn't know, who we are. But then all of a sudden, my sister's got her on the phone, and she says, well, here, this is Chuck. And she just says, yeah, hey, Chuck, how are you doing? And then she starts singing a song. And my mom loves to make up songs. And she just starts doing words. But this one, she started singing, I've got a son who's a preacher. And realizing that she knows who I am. In that moment, And so she's sitting there and 4 lines in this song that she's singing and that she's making up, and it's all about me. And I realized she realizes who I am. And those days you're grateful for, because you realize how much longer is she going to be here. She might outlive us all. I don't know. But yet you watch and you see these things happen. And then you ask yourself this question: when I leave, when I die, will I leave a legacy behind? And what's it going to be? Or am I just going to be, as soon as the obituary comes out and I'm dead, will anybody ever miss me? Will they even notice that you're gone? And sometimes you begin to ask yourself questions. And then you really need to ask yourself this question, and you do, that will I build something that's going to help carry me on into my eternal life? Or is this just it? And then it's over with and everything is done. And so what we need to understand is that as human beings, part of our DNA says, I want to be significant. I want to be important. I want to care. I want people to care. And so what we want to talk about is gratitude. And so we really want to know that when we leave this world, has our life really served a purpose? Because if it hasn't, then we've wasted every moment that we've been here for. Because it should be significant. It isn't just a time to realize that our life does matter. So when we begin to start looking at all of this, we begin to look at all of our life, like our work, the work that you do. Now sometimes you say, well, it's really a nothing job. But every job that we do is important because it's benefiting somebody. And if nothing else, it gives us an opportunity to talk to people and to share with people. Maybe you've got a coworker or somebody that you know that's hurting. And just your presence there and just a word pulls them out of a funk. And sometimes we don't even know how much of an impression that we've left on somebody. And so what begins to happen is that the Bible tells us that if we live a life of gratitude, that it will give us a life of significance. If all you're doing all the time is just going around complaining about everything, your life is not significant. But if you learn how to be thankful for even the little things in life, then you'll learn how to have a significant life. What ends up happening is, through this gratitude, is we learn how to pay it forward. It's so many times you're watching as you go into a drive-through, and you're sitting there, and then all of a sudden you say, "Hey, I want to." They've made they've already taken your order. They've given you how much it is, and then the next thing you know, there's somebody behind you. So you get up to the cashier, that's there, that's waiting, and you say, listen, they tell you how much it is. Hey, I'd like to go ahead and pay for the person behind me, too. Well, you're paying it backwards. What we want to do is pay it forward. And what that means is that what I do will help someone else to do something else. And yes, in a way, you're paying it forward, hoping that the person behind will turn around and pay for somebody. It doesn't always work that way. That person just says, oh, thank you, and the rest of these people can pay for their own meal. I got me a free meal today. But it's just little things. I was in Milton's the other day, and I was getting some donuts, and this guy came in, and he was right in front of me, and they were talking to him and said, hey, how you doing today? He says, oh, I'm doing great. Today's my 63rd birthday. I thought, okay, cool. So he's getting some donuts, and I walk up to him, to the guy, because I know the guy that runs or works over there, and I told him, I said, hey, Billy, put his on mine. I'll pay for it. He says, you don't have to do that. I said, I know, I don't have to do that. It's your birthday. Enjoy your donuts. And he turns around and he says, nobody's ever done this for me. And I said, well, cool. You're 63. First time in your life somebody bought you donuts for your birthday. That's cool. Now maybe you can find somebody to do the same for them. It's just the little things in life, that you just do. It's not you're looking for it. It's just it happens. And it says, there it is. And so what we need to understand is what exactly is gratitude. And let me give you a definition, okay? Gratitude is this. It's the practice of actively remembering and expressing grace. Okay? It's benefits that we do not deserve, and goodness that's bestowed in our lives. So when we look at things, and there are things that we get or we receive, and it really, when you think about it sometimes, there's a lot of times when we get things or receive things, we don't deserve it. We didn't do anything for it. It just happened. I mean, it's one thing to do something that somebody reciprocates to give you something for something. But it's totally different when you receive something and you did nothing for it. Nothing at all. It was just given to you. That's grace. But gratitude is being able to help share those things and expressing those things. So in Genesis chapter 8, verse 15 through 20, we'll have it up here on the screen. We're going to go back to kind of early in the Bible. We're going to look at one of the first acts of gratitude mentioned in the Bible. And there's some things really significant about this that we're going to point out this morning. Look at what he says. Then God spoke to Noah. Verse 16 says, come out of the ark, you, your wife, your sons, and your sons' wives with you. The 8 living people left on the earth. 17. Now, bring out all of the living creatures that are with you. Birds, livestock, those that crawl on the earth. And they will spread over the earth and be fruitful and multiply on the earth. Now, just a side note, as I've told you before, remember the Bible story that when Noah went on the ark. He took the animals 2 by 2. That is a fable. Noah did not take animals 2 by 2. The only animals that were there by pairs are animals that were dirty, unclean. Okay? And the reason that they were 2 by 2 was because those animals, unclean animals, were not going to be sacrificed. There was a male and a female, pairs of those two. If you go back and look, God told him to take 7 of the clean animals. Why? Because the clean animals, doves, cows, things like that, those were going to be sacrificed, the lambs. They were going to be sacrificed. So there were going to be 7 of them. So he wanted to make sure that there was at least 1 male in that bunch and 1 female. Most of the time it was probably 1 male and 6 females probably. Okay? In order to populate. But anyway, birds, livestock, and those that crawl on the earth, and they will spread it over the earth, and they will be fruitful and multiply on the earth. Verse number 18. So Noah, along with his sons, his wife, and his son's wife, came out. They came out. 19. He's with me, all. All the animals, all the creatures that crawl, all the flying creatures, everything that moves on the earth came out of the ark by their families. Okay? Now look at this. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord. He took some of every kind of clean animal and every kind of clean bird and offered burnt offerings on the altar. So if there was only 2 birds and 2 animals, Noah would have offered up one of them, and guess what? That would have been extinction. Automatically. He took more than 2 clean animals. They were there for reasons, okay? Now, let me give you some side notes. Noah was on the ark for about a year. Not a couple days. It didn't rain for 40 days and 40 nights. Then all of a sudden God says, whoosh, all dry, come on out. It took a while for the rain and everything to dissipate. Okay? So, Noah walks off the boat, and what does it say? He builds an altar to the Lord. Noah's first act after he came off the ark was an act of gratitude. The very first thing. Now, when you're listening to and you're reading this, it's really easy to read over. How many times have you read this story and have you passed over the fact that the very first thing that Noah did when he got off the boat was build an altar, offered sacrifices to the God, to the Lord? Did you ever read that? Did you ever catch that? We just think that, okay, got off, they went their way, they started building this Tower of Babel. No, he did something. And it's very significant about the things that he did. Because when you really start digging into what he did, it begins to really enlighten us a whole lot. He's been on there for 365 days. He walks off the plank, and he makes a conscious decision. A very conscious decision that the very first thing he's going to do is not get down and kiss the ground. the very first thing he's going to do is say, thank you. Thank you. Okay? Now, what you don't find is nowhere in the story do you ever read that God told Noah. We hear God speaking to Noah and telling him to build an ark. We hear God telling Noah specifically how to build the ark. We hear God telling Noah specifically animals he was to take. Gather up. But basically, God gathered the animals and they came. And if you ever go to the ark encounter that's there with the answers in Genesis, that ark is just phenomenal. The way that it would catch the rainwater so that they would have fresh water. The way that the food was set up. The cages, the way that they were built. It's just meticulous how God gave them the plans so that everything would fit together. So, but I don't find anywhere in this story that when Noah is coming off the ark that God ever told him, go build me an altar and offer up some sacrifices. Now you got to understand something. Number one, God had never given any statutes or commandments regarding worship. You won't find it nowhere in this story. Nowhere in the scriptures where you see it up until this point in time. Go look for it and see if you can find it. Number two, you'll also find that organized religion or faith, it was still thousands of years away. Started in Exodus chapter 20. Far way off before they really started doing all of this stuff. Noah, in Genesis chapter 6, verses 5 and 6, you will find that Noah and his family were the only people on the whole earth that were followers of God. On the whole earth, there was just 8 of them. That was it. 8 followers. That's all. So when you begin to look at this, this is not a whole bunch of people doing this. This is a singular practice to God. Him wanting to say thank you. It wasn't a community. And the other thing is that an offering to God or a thanksgiving was not something that this whole society did. Because they didn't want God. They didn't want to serve him. They didn't want to have anything to do with him. And as a matter of fact, they were all pagans. Except for Noah and his family. Now Noah, he didn't offer up a sacrifice because God gave him a great fortune. I mean, look at what he had. Working all of his life, and all he has is an ark filled with dirty, stinking animals. I don't know about you all, but if you've ever had a cat or a dog that's gone in your house and peed and pooped for 365 days, it's going to stink. And that smell, ladies and gentlemen, it is going to be in your clothes. And when you start to eat, you're gonna need nose clips. Because it's going to stink. But here is Noah. And the first thing that he wants to do when he gets off of this big wooden box is to say, thank you. Thank you. And so when you begin to look at it, he's been in there. He's been drenched with the mess of the animals. During this whole time, he's being tossed around. Okay, if you've ever been on a boat in a storm, ladies and gentlemen, it is not like sitting on the dock of the bay. I am sure that there were a few times that they got really sick from the rocking of that boat and moving back and forth. But then all of a sudden, this boat lands on the top of a mountain. And it's like, really? I mean, couldn't you put me in a valley somewhere? You gotta take this boat and put it on a mountain. Now what we going to do? We got to get out of the boat and go somewhere and build some houses. So, how did God respond to Noah's gratitude? That's found in Genesis chapter 8, verse 21, over to Genesis chapter 9 and verse 1. And here's what he said. When the Lord smelled, Noah, nobody had taught him how to do a sacrifice. Never done one before. He did his first one. When the Lord smelled the pleasing aroma. Remember when they offered up the sacrifices in the temple? They would put the incense in there, and it would make it a sweet smell, aroma to God's nostril. God, I don't know what he put on there. I don't know what he was barbecuing them with, you know. But here it is. When he smelled it, he said to himself, look at what God said, I will never again curse the ground because of human beings. Hold on a minute. God cursed the ground because of humans? Our actions cause all of creation to hurt. But I will never again curse the ground because of human beings, even though the inclination of the human heart is evil from youth onward. From the time that they're a youth onward, their heart is evil. No wonder teenagers get in trouble. Now you understand why he says to train up a child when they are yet young, so that when they get old, they will not depart. Because if you don't train up a child when they are young, ladies and gentlemen, if they start getting trained as a youth, they're going to be evil. So everybody's trying to figure out, why are all these young people, these youth, these teenagers, why are they always getting into trouble? Why? They don't have parents at home. I was with a couple of ladies from Mayfield. There was a lady. She had just gotten custody of her two teenage brothers. She had no couch, no chairs. She lived on the third floor. They got not a love seat. They got a couch with 3 seats and an oversized chair. We got the oversized chair, but we couldn't get the couch because you couldn't turn the couch. And they said, okay, well, why don't we just get a rope and we'll tie on the rope and we'll tie on the couch and we'll take and lift that thing up 3 stories. Well, I came and got the rope, and then I thought, there ain't no way we're going to do this, because how are we going to get that thing straight? Unless somebody got a lift, so we can't do it. So I don't know if they ever got the couch up or not. But I know one thing. I don't know what happened to the parents of this child, that the courts gave her custody of the children. And now she's got to raise her two brothers. Having a hard enough time raising herself. And if those children were just turned loose, guess what they're going to do? They're going to get in trouble. But somebody loved enough to reach out to help these children. And I'm sorry, but this is what God says. Okay, and then in verse number 22, as long as the earth endures, seed times and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night will not cease. May I say this to you. I don't care what they say about global warming. You can say it's real or not real. I don't care. All I know is for a fact that there is always going to be day and night, cold and heat, summer and winter. I don't care if it's 98 degrees on January the 12th. Okay? It's still winter. Okay? It may be hot, but it gets that way sometimes. Okay? And there are other times that on July the 12th, it might be 32 snowing. Who really cares? He says it's going to be there, and day and night will not cease. So they can do anything and everything that they want. Summer and winter will still be with us, ladies and gentlemen. Day and night will still be with us. Cold and heat. Okay? It's going to be there no matter what they say, because God said so. Okay? That is your public announcement for today. Okay? So when anybody wants to start arguing with you, just give them this verse. Okay? Here's what it says. God blessed Noah and his sons, and he said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. God is blessing Noah not because he earned it. Noah didn't do anything to earn this blessing. All he was doing was being obedient to God. God was taking care of Noah. He had everything taken care of because God knew how long Noah was going to be on that ark. He wasn't going to run out of food. It wasn't going to be, well, I've got these animals and I don't have enough cages. He knew exactly how many cages, exact width and everything that it was supposed to be. The shape of it, so that it would float for 365 days. God had it all planned out for him. He's just following orders. And so God blesses him. And it was not a response to his obedience. We get blessed because we choose obedience. When you choose not to obey God, you don't get blessed. But when you choose to obey God and become obedient, then you become blessed. In the last few years, during this pandemic, it amazes me the number of Christians that are complaining. They have nothing. Well, my question to them is this: how obedient during these 2 years have you been to God? If they were obedient, then why are churches empty? Why is it when someone needs help, you're begging people to help? No, I got to take care of me. No, God will take care of you. He already said he would. Why? If you would be obedient. So in this story, we find that Noah got blessed because he chose to worship. I hear a lot of people say, well, you don't understand, Pastor. I can worship God anywhere. Absolutely, you can, personally. But what about your corporate worship? You can't do corporate worship by yourself. And there are times we need corporate worship. We need one another. So, next week, we're having communion. It is the first Sunday of the month. And there's a little word that is used in some places, and it's called Eucharist. Okay? And you'll hear it a lot of times used, the Eucharist is used during communion. But the English word for gratitude stems from the Latin word called gratia. Okay? Or Spanish, it's gracias. Okay? Gratia is Greek, G-R-A-T-I-A. And so we don't say gratia, but the word for gratitude, if you look at the word gratia, we translate it as grace. Okay? And so in the Bible, gratitude is the word for Eucharist. Okay? It's Eucharist with an A. And so when you see it, it has this A there. And it stems also from the word called charis, C-H-A-R-I-S, which means grace. And grace is a favor, an act of goodwill, and loving kindness for which we do not deserve. Okay? So hang with me. So the Eucharist is an offering of thanks out of the abundance of grace that is shown to us. It is given to us. It is to give thanks to the Lord with pleasure and delight because we receive delight and pleasure from His grace. So when we take communion and we take the Eucharist, ladies and gentlemen, is the bread and the wine. It's us showing our gratitude to the Lord for what He did, His grace, which we don't deserve. And what's happened is a lot of people don't take communion because they say, I don't deserve this. You are absolutely right, you don't deserve it. That's the reason you do take it. If you deserved it, you'd be out of here. You would have been on the cross dying for everybody. No, He extended His grace to us that we don't deserve. So guess what? It is my pleasure to be able to experience the Eucharist, to find the pleasure in the grace that He extends to me. And when we don't take it and we allow Satan to lie to us and saying you are not worthy, basically taking the translation out of the book of Corinthians saying those that are not worthy. If you're a child of God, you're worthy. And it's not you are worthy, it's He made you worthy. There's nothing you and I can do to make us worthy. He does it through His grace. The people that were getting sick were the people that were not Christians, had never experienced grace, and they're trying to take getting the pleasure out of what He meant for grace, as a measure of His grace, as an example of His grace. And they were taking it saying, well, yeah, I deserve this. No, you don't. But if you're a child of God, you deserve it. He said so, that He's given you His grace. And you need to understand something. The Eucharist is not a horizontal. It's not a horizontal practice. It's not okay, God, you're giving me this, and so I'm going to take it. Because grace, ladies and gentlemen, does not travel one way and then go back. Grace only comes one way. And it goes that way. And so what happens is this. It's a time of giving and receiving at the same time. What am I doing? God is giving to me, and I'm receiving. What can I give back for His grace? I don't deserve it. He's given me something I don't deserve. He gave it to me. And we need to understand these things. And so what we can do, though, is this. When God extends His grace to us, we can extend it to others. And so when we take this gratitude, we're talking much more than just a thank you. Okay? There was a story that was in the newspaper that I found. It happened back in 2021. Okay? It was kind of during the height of all of this. And here's the story. It was a story about a police officer who was responding to a man who was threatening suicide by jumping off the top of a high building. It actually was in St. Paul, Minnesota. When the officer arrived at the scene, the man on the ledge uttered as he positioned himself perched to jump, "No one loves me. No one cares if I die. No one will miss me." The officer said it was as if the man's despair was painfully evident as he repeated the statement or the sentiment over and over. As other officers tried to talk him off the ledge, the officer realized the situation was getting worse, not better, and that the man was on the ledge was going to jump. And as the officer witnessed the man's pain, he said all he could think about at that moment was, "I love this man. I care for this man." So this is what the officer offered this man on the ledge. This intrinsic feeling of love that he had for him. As the man continued to vocalize his brokenness, the writer wrote, the officer gently stated, "Don't jump. I love you. You are loved. You're not alone. And someone cares for you. I care for you. I love you." The officer said this repeatedly. And you can actually go to the internet and search it, and you'll find the audio of the officer talking this thing down. But the writer goes on, and the surrounding officers testified that these words brought the man out of the trance of despair. As the officer continued to tell the stranger on the ledge that he loved him, the man climbed off the ledge and fell into the officer's arms, sobbing. The officer held him, embraced him, and continued to repeat that he loved him. When the reporters asked the officer why he felt this way towards a man he did not even know, the officer replied something to this effect: "I just felt I loved him, even though I didn't even know him. And it broke my heart to see him feel so unloved. Because I am loved, I knew I loved him. Because I am loved." May I say this to you? This is God's expression of love. When God knows that we love Him, He pours out His love towards us and loves us right back. And so when we experience God's grace, we want to express it. And the easy way to recognize God's grace is when we realize that our life's greater needs are met. You see, God's not giving you what you want. He's giving you what you need. And can I tell you something? The Bible says my Father knows everything that I need. And he says, I will supply all your needs. Not all your wants, but your needs. One of the biggest tasks that you have as parents is to get your children to say thank you. It's not normal for them to do that. But one of the things that we do at Christmas time, which makes our opening up of Christmas presents so long. But we taught our children to do this from the very beginning. And that is this. And Diana gets mad at me because when she and I wrap presents, she goes through and systematically will say, okay, this is a present to Libby. And let's see, you gave her the last one, so I'll give her this one. But when she gives it to me to wrap, I just tell her it's from both of us. And why? Because here's the way we do this. If we give you a present at Christmas time, you open up the present, but the next person cannot open their present until you go over and give that person a hug and say thank you. Most kids, look at your family. What do? It's a mad rush. Half the time you don't even know what's paper and what's presents because it's still all covered up. But at the end of ours, you know what's presents and you know what's paper because we've collected the paper because that was something that my dad did. And it's just a custom tradition that I do. I just get all the paper and just keep putting it in the bag so by the end of the night it's all put up. But our kids and our grandkids, they come to our house, you learn to say thank you to people. Not just open a present, because you're getting something you really don't deserve. You're getting something that somebody thinks that you might need, that they really wanted to give you something special. But sometimes it's hard to teach kids gratitude. I sometimes I have a hard time because when I go to the store, I forget that I'm old now and that I'm the elder, because I was always taught you open the door for people. And I don't care if they're 12 or 18 or 28 or whatever. I would always open the door. And I'm going to these places and I'm opening the doors for these young people and they're saying, no, sir, go ahead. And I'm thinking, somebody taught them right. And you tell them thank you. And so sometimes we need to understand what God is saying to us. There are times that God gives us His grace or His charis. And sometimes it just seems so small that we forget to say thank you. One of the first things that I do every morning, I hit the floor, is I don't verbalize it, but in my mind I just say, thank you, Lord. Another day. What do you have in store? It's just little things, that you take for granted. Being able to sit here this morning. There are others that wish they could, but they can't. Being able to breathe. You still have the pains and the aches. But you're not just surviving. When's the last time you really thanked God for that? And not just out of habit. Truly meant it. And saying, thank you for your grace. You see, God gives back to us when we become this gratitude. You know, here's why we do what we do, and this is the one thing that you need to understand. In Exodus chapter 12, verse 24 through 27, these are the ones that we're going to finish with. Because here's something that you probably have not done. If you haven't, you need to. Do you remember in Exodus chapter 12, Pharaoh, they had gone through the plagues, and now they're coming down to the very last one. And God told him, he says, okay, listen, I told you, I promised you this land over here. And I've heard your prayers, and I'm going to deliver you from your slavery. And all these plagues have come up, and they're still there. And they're wondering, okay, God, you've given us a promise, but you're not coming out. We're still here. We've gone through these flies and locusts and frogs and blood and all this other stuff, and we're still here. God, why? And he says, I got one more. And he says, here's what I want you to do. I want you all to go into your homes. And I want you to get an offering of sacrifice. And what I want you to do is I want you to prepare the meat. And if your neighbors don't have any, invite them over to your house. And here's what I want you to do. I want you to take the blood from that sacrifice and I want you to put it over the doorposts. Because if you don't, here's what's going to happen. The angel of death is going to come through here tonight. And he's going to take the firstborn of every home that doesn't have the blood applied. This one was affecting the Egyptians and the Israelites. So when they all gathered in there, they had put the blood over. It's nighttime. They're in their homes, and all they hear is wailing because the angel of death is passing over the houses. And one by one, death is coming to the homes that are not protected. And mothers, fathers are crying because their children has died instantaneously. And God said, here's what I want you to do. He says, I want you to keep this command permanently as a statute for you and your descendants. This is the feast of the Passover. Okay? And when you enter the land that the Lord will give you as he promised, you are to observe this ceremony. Not a one-time shot, ladies and gentlemen. When you enter into the land of promise, I want you to do this. Verse 26. When your children ask you, what does the ceremony mean to you? Verse 27. You are to reply, it is the Passover sacrifice to the Lord. For he passed over the houses of the Israelites in Egypt when he struck the Egyptians and spared our homes. So the people knelt low and worshiped. You know what he's saying, ladies and gentlemen? Teach your children what communion is all about. It's a sign of God's protection over you, your home, to give you life. And he says you continue to do this with gratitude. And God knows that we can be forgetful. So next week when we come, we need to understand that we're coming to give gratitude back to God for giving us His grace that we don't deserve. That's why we do this. In 2018, in a magazine or study, it was called The Science of Gratitude. Here's what they found. They found that the desire to express and receive gratitude stems from our biological roots that appear to be embedded in our history, the structure of our brains, and in child development. And although gratitude can be heavily influenced by culture, it also appears to be an inherent part of human nature, even in animals. Even in animals. They found that animals such as chimpanzees, fish, birds, vampire bats, all exhibit a desire to receive and exhibit gratitude. And they called it reciprocal altruism. And what it does is it initiates a behavior that helps another, an unrelated individual, even at a cost to themselves, because they innately know inside that this reciprocal altruism or gratitude will benefit them later. When we begin to start asking ourselves the most important question, and that is this: what about grace? What do I deserve? Because when we realize that we're receiving something that we don't deserve, then we're going to feel a sense of gratitude to extend that to others. But so many times you hear the thing, you scratch my back and I'll scratch yours. It shouldn't be that way. I should extend my grace whether you give back to me or not. And so what I need you to do this week is I need you to just think about what are you really grateful for in your life? What is it? We can easily say, "Oh, I'm grateful that I'm alive. I'm grateful that I'm this. I'm grateful that." I'm talking about, let's really search. What are you grateful for? You know? What about God leading you to talk to someone, to share Jesus? And you watch them come to the saving grace of Jesus Christ. Or just someone that was hurting and you just gave them a hug. You didn't even say a word. You just gave them a hug. Or maybe you needed a hug. And somebody out of the blue just came up and said, you know what, you look like you need a hug. And you say, you know, God, I am so grateful that you sent that person my way. I'm grateful for that. But God, I'm even more grateful that they listened.